Welcome to Bonnie's Beat. I'm your host, Bonnie Squires. We're coming to you from Radnor Studio 21 in beautiful downtown Wayne. We'd like to educate you about what your neighbors are doing in academia, in the charity world, in the political world, sometimes even in the sports world, authors, etc. And as usual, we have a very important guest in the studio today, and her name is Lynn Yeakel. Hi, Lynn Yeakel.
Hello, Bonnie Squires.
It was my favorite candidate for U.S. Senate a few years ago, right?
It's been a few years.
She came that close to being the woman senator. Would you have been the first woman senator?
No. There were two women in the Senate that year. That was 1992. And that one was a Republican and one was a Democrat. And as one of the women running used to say, 2%'s okay for milk, but not for the U.S. Senate. And
I love it.
You know, we tried to change things. And actually, there were 4 other new women elected that year.
Well, you certainly forged the way for a lot of women candidates, you know. And Lynn was very prominent in the audience at Bryn Mawr College a short time ago when Hillary Clinton was giving a major address to the Women in Public Service Project Institute that was being held there with women leaders from third world countries from around the world who had survived civil war and other horrible things.
That was very impressive. I was impressed by those wonderful young women in their native clothes, beautiful, beautiful clothes. And
Uganda, Sierra Leone, Afghanistan.
Right. And I was also impressed by Hillary Clinton's message to them, which was really about leadership and the importance of women's leadership all around the world.
And Jane Harman, an old favorite of mine, who used to be a congresswoman and who's now the head of the Woodrow Wilson International Scholars Institute in Washington, was given the honor of introducing Hillary. And when she said, "How many of you were in Beijing with Hillary?" My hand shot up. I saw Connie Williams' hand shot up across the way. And then she quoted what Hillary had said, which still resonates. Human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights, which is not a message that's very popular in a lot of countries around the world. In a lot of cities in America, as a matter of fact.
Right. I think we need to do some work in our own backyard, you know, while we're really, and that's really what I'm working on. I've been trying for many years to accelerate the pace of women's progress in the United States in particular, but it certainly extends around the world because we're all connected.
Lynn has 2 important titles these days, among a variety of titles and responsibilities. She is the co-chair and co-founder of Vision 2020. We're going to talk about that. And she's also the director of the Institute for Women's Health and Leadership at Drexel University's College of Medicine. Let's talk about Vision 2020 first. Oh, I love the tagline, equality in sight.
Right. And that's really what it's about. It's about the year 2020 when this nation celebrates the centennial of women's voting rights. And we are working to get to 50-50 by 2020 in terms of women's leadership in the United States. And that means women in top leadership positions where we are not doing terribly well. So Vision 2020...
How can you say that? We have a congressional delegation with 18 members of Congress from Pennsylvania, and we have a woman among the 18, right?
We've got one woman, but she is the only woman in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware, the only woman in a congressional delegation. And as you know, she's given up her seat because she's running for governor. So, you know, it's very important that we elect more women to office. And that's really that's one of many things that I've been working on. But I really think, as Hillary said that day, and I thought it was a great line, she said, "Women hold up half the sky." That's an old Chinese proverb. Wouldn't you think women should have something to say about what's underneath the sky? And I love that, her example, because the institute that I run is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year, and we are bringing in Nicholas Kristof, who is the co-author of Half the Sky with his wife Cheryl Wu Dunn, and he is going to be one of our main speakers. So,
I'll be there.
Yeah, good.
I'll be there.
You're invited.
What's the date?
It's September 26th. And it's down at Drexel. And Bonnie, to go back to your connection between the Drexel, the Institute for Women's Health and Leadership, and Vision 2020. Vision 2020 is a project of the Institute, and it's a project that I came up with, and I am now the executive director of that, along with co-chairing the leadership group with Rosemary Greco. But it's a national coalition of individuals and organizations working to achieve women's economic and social equality. And we're using the year 2020 as our target date because of the centennial of women's voting rights. And we're going to host the national celebration here in Philadelphia.
Fantastic. So Seneca Falls, right?
Uh-huh.
We'll replicate Seneca Falls. We'll build a movie set.
Well, it's interesting about Seneca Falls because I actually have been pretty intrigued by a certain set of numbers. It was 72 years from the Seneca Falls Women's Rights Convention in 1848 until the ratification of the 19th Amendment in 1920. It was another 72 years from 1920 until the Year of the Woman when I ran in 1992. And so think how long that is. And so now, you know, what we're saying is we've been gradually getting into more opportunities for women, but nothing like we should be. So you want the statistics on women's leadership in the U.S.? Because they're pretty shocking. Across the board, and this is across the professions, and including the U.S. Congress, women represent about 18% of senior leadership positions. In the Fortune,
I didn't realize it was that high.
Yeah, it's 18%, right. And that's the number in the U.S. Congress, but it's also in academics, it's also across the professions. With the Fortune 500 companies, we've now got a whopping 21 women CEOs, which means there are 479 men CEOs. So, you know, and of course in the presidential sweepstakes, I love to point out that it's 44-0. So we have a lot of work to do.
We just lost Geraldine Ferrero, who was the first woman candidate for vice president.
Right.
We haven't had, well, there may have been some women who tried to get the nomination for president, but
Pat Schroeder ran at one point, I know.
I saw her on a panel on MSNBC recently. She looked fabulous.
Yeah, she's great.
And she has such an interesting, important things to say. But I wanted to share with our viewers what Hillary said about a study that had been done in India of small villages whose leadership was female, comparing it to villages run by men. And the villages run by women, she said, had cleaner water, safer water, more emphasis on infrastructure, and better health for their children as compared to villages run by men. I thought, well, that's worth a great deal, you know, in a third world country. Absolutely.
Right.
So let's hear it for the women. Now, everybody can be a member of Vision 2020. You'll take men's money too, right?
Oh, of course.
Yes.
In fact, I have to say, you know, we have a new strategic plan for Vision 2020 now that the project is 5 years old, because I actually thought it up back in 2009, and we're now, you know, coming up on our 4th national Congress of delegates from all over the country, and we have always included men in our leadership circle and in our ambassadors and at our congresses, but we actually have a target of increasing the number of men who are actively involved, because really, you know, we're all in this together, and the goal is shared leadership among women and men. So it's not like we're trying to say we can do it all by ourselves. Not at all. It's that we think we should be working together. And one of our projects, one of the national goals for Vision 2020, is to educate young girls and boys to value gender equality and shared leadership, and to see how it's a mutually beneficial collaboration to work together, because they have different perspectives, different experiences, and come out with better decisions.
Well, one of the points that Hillary made was that if you exclude half of the world's population, you do not get to the goal nearly so quickly as if you included everybody.
Right.
And it's always, every year when Catalyst, that wonderful nonprofit based in New York, when they come up with their report on numbers and percentages of women, not only who are CEOs of Fortune 500, but who sit on corporate boards, it's sickening. There's so few women. It's such a small percentage, and it doesn't make a lot of sense because today, in a lot of families, the woman is the bread earner, or she's earning more money than her husband is.
40% of families have women as their primary breadwinners.
40%.
40%. And by the way, Catalyst is a national ally of Vision 2020.
Terrific.
We have 68 organizations that include the American Bar Association, Girl Scouts of the USA, Women in Civil Engineering, all these different groups that have signed on as our national allies.
American Association of University Women?
Yes, that's one of the most active.
Yeah, they're terrific.
They're very, very good. And the reason is Vision 2020 is like an umbrella over all these national organizations that are working on similar goals. And our goal is to align our activities and efforts so that we are all helping and supporting each other and moving together towards the goals, because we're a lot stronger when we're working together, for sure.
I thought I knew everything about Lynn Yeakel because I campaigned very heartily for her when she ran, and I've known her a very long time, followed her career. But what I learned today is that she's also a published author.
Yes.
And the title of her book is A Will and a Way. And it presents insights into the key issues of women's independence based on her own experience and lessons from history. Tell us what motivated you to write a book. And how did you find the time? You're so busy.
Well, to tell you the truth, ever since I ran for office, which is now over 20 years ago,
Seems like it was yesterday.
I know. It doesn't seem that long ago to me either. But I had kept a lot of notes from that experience about such things as the special challenges that women have to overcome in terms of media coverage often, in terms of stereotyping experience, so that my nonprofit leadership experience was not valued the same way somebody's legal experience might be.
And fundraising.
Fundraising, exactly, right. And so I had been keeping notes for quite a long time, and I decided that I really wanted to pull it all together because I have been at this, at women's progress issues, for 40 years, which is really stunning to me, going back to the founding of Women's Way and being the CEO of Women's Way for many years.
That's right. I guess that's
And
where
then,
I first met you,
yes,
at Women's
probably,
Way.
Yeah, and that was back in the mid-70s and then all through the 80s. And then I left my job at Women's Way after I won the primary for the U.S. Senate. And then President Clinton appointed me to be regional director of the Department of Health and Human Services. So that's what I was doing when you went to Beijing. I had just started working for Donna Shalala and had a very big and busy job, for the federal government. But in
Clinton had a knack for, we won't talk about Monica, but Clinton had a knack for picking the brightest, most talented women to have really key positions in his administration.
He had some wonderful
Amazing.
women.
And Donna Shalala is now the president, of University of Miami?
Yes, and she's one of our national advisors for Vision 2020.
She's phenomenal.
In fact, last year on August 26th, which is Women's Equality Day, she authored an op-ed about Vision 2020 that ran in papers all over the U.S. But through all of these careers, and including my time at Drexel, which is now 11 years that I've been at the College of Medicine, all of those things have been like a continuum of experiences about the sort of missing pieces in getting our half of the population equal to the other half. And really it's about equality for everybody. It's about racial equality and as well as gender equality. It's really about the promise of our democracy, which is that all of us are equal. So that career led me to want to write this book, because the book kind of takes pieces from all of those experiences and puts them together with themes. And I think many of the themes are the themes that we're still working on today that have to do with leadership.
A Will and a Way by Lynn Yeakel. Can people get it on Amazon?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I know the bookstores are closing as we speak.
Oh.
So, but Amazon will be there,
Yes.
Amazon.com.
Well, as a matter of fact, it was in the window in Wayne in the Reader's Forum for many months.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
They had the book there, so I suspect they still do. Yeah.
The late Constantine Papadakis, Drexel president, he also cultivated women leaders, right?
Yes. Well, and he, along with the dean of the medical school, with whom I work closely, gave me the planning grant to start Vision 2020. When I had this idea, and we've worked in collaboration with the National Constitution Center since the very beginning, but I went to my dean and to President...
Is that Marla? Is Marla the dean? Who's
No. Now it's Dr. Daniel Shidlow. It was Dr. Rick Homan prior to that, and both of whom have been very, very supportive of the work that we're doing, because the Institute for Women's Health and Leadership has many more programs. Vision 2020 is just one of them, but it's really the continuation of the legacy of our medical school, which I'm sure you know was the first medical school for women in the world.
Oh, yes.
Founded in
Women's
Philadelphia.
Medical.
Women's Medical. Founded in Philadelphia in 1850.
1850.
So, right. So it's quite a legacy, and and part of our mission is to continue the legacy of blazing trails for women and connecting women's leadership and women's health, because there's a direct connection.
It's interesting. You remind me that I think I was in 8th grade when I had to write a book report, and I read a book, Elizabeth Blackwell, the first woman doctor. And she was from Philadelphia.
Right.
And I always remember that name, and from time to time, her name pops up. I see it in an article, I see it in an exhibit at a museum, or the National Constitution Center.
There's a very interesting play about her. I think it's called A Woman Alone, and we brought that to Drexel a couple of years ago, and it was very, very interesting, because like many other women who got their medical degrees in the 19th century, she was not able to practice medicine in the U.S. Because nobody would accept her. So she went to Europe. Coming out of our medical school, many women went as missionaries to Latin America and all over the world. And so in our lobby at the Institute for Women's Health and Leadership, we have a globe, and it's called Making a World of Difference, and it shows where our graduates have gone over all those 163 years all over the world to serve underserved populations.
You remind me of something that I heard Sandra Day O'Connor say at the American Bar Association a few years ago, when they decided to name the Diversity Award, the Sandra Day O'Connor Award. And as brilliant as she is, when she was graduated from law school, they would offer her a secretary's position.
I know.
Nobody would offer her a job as an attorney. I mean, when you hear that, you think, here's a woman who became a star on the U.S. Supreme Court, and the male chauvinist piggies, they offered her a job as a secretary.
Right.
Unbelievable.
Well, I mean, I had a similar experience in that, and you know, she's older than I am, but there wasn't much difference. When I had gone to an all-girls school and a women's college, and nobody told me that I couldn't do whatever I wanted to do. So I moved to New York, where I discovered that the only thing anybody wanted to know when I was looking for a job was, can you type? And my answer was, yes, but that's not what I want to do. So it took me a long time to get a job, and then when I did, I started sort of moving up the ladder, and then I came to Philadelphia and had all these recommendations for the career that I was looking for, and was actually turned down for a job here by a man who said, we're not ready for a woman at this level. So many years later, you'll like this story. I actually wrote about this in my book. many years later, after I had run for the Senate and had, a lot of publicity and a lot of, a great platform, I ran into this man whom I hadn't seen in years in a restaurant in Philadelphia. And I went over to him and thanked him for setting me on my career path, because it was I was so angry and so humiliated, by not getting this job just because of my gender.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but that.
What did he say? I hope he turned red and green and purple.
He did.
He should have.
And he said it was a different time then. I mean, he sort of got apologetic and defensive, but the fact was, it was a number of years after that before they actually did bring a woman in at that level. It was an account executive position in a public relations firm. And I had all the credentials, which everybody agreed, but we're not ready for a woman.
Not ready for a woman.
Right.
Well, look how long it took the major law firms in Philadelphia to bring on board a woman partner.
Right.
I mean, and to this day, there are a lot of prejudices against women executives. You know that.
Well, that's one thing Vision 2020 is working to change, because one of our goals is to work with employers on family-friendly policies so that men and women can share and not be stigmatized for taking parental leave, for taking turns with family responsibilities, caregiving and all. And given our world of technology, flexible schedules are much easier now than they ever have been.
There are a lot of people that are working from home on a computer.
Exactly.
That's true.
So one of the things that we want to really advocate is that more employers have family-friendly policies which make it possible for women to keep going in their careers instead of dropping out when they have caregiving responsibilities. And then another one is to increase the number of women in senior leadership. So we're working with the 30% Coalition on getting more women on corporate boards. And that's a pretty interesting collaboration, and there are a number of groups involved in that. But there are very few women on major corporate boards, usually no more than two. If there's more than one, and some have none.
And some of them, if they're either Hispanic or African American and a female, they figure they've covered 3 bases. They get credit for all of that,
Right.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, I don't know that Governor Corbett has been a leader in putting women in important positions, but there's somebody from the main line, Carol Yeakel, who is fabulous, who is the Secretary of the Commonwealth. And just very recently, I got to meet the newly named Secretary of Public Welfare. The name will soon be changed to Department of Human Services, thank heavens. But her name is Beverly McAreth. And she had spent 8 years in the legislature. She started out as a social worker, and she's a Republican, but what a breath of fresh air. And that's probably between welfare and education, that's the biggest chunk of the state budget, those two places.
Right.
So I was really thrilled to spend time with Beverly McAreth. And
that's great. I don't know her. But
well, you have to meet her because you'll really like her. And she's got a sense of humor, which is so important, And her priorities seem to be in order.
Nice.
And she knows that it's always a burden to be a woman in a high executive position. I mean, it is. The world has changed a little bit, but it hasn't changed that much, right?
Right. But it's changing. It's changing. It's just, again, we'd like to see things move a little faster. And I think in many cases, there are people in leadership positions who would like to know how to get more women into senior leadership positions, and we would like to help them. I mean, that's one of the other pieces of Vision 2020, because one thing that we believe is that when women are in senior leadership, and that means, like not only the CEOs, but the leadership team. This is something that Hillary Clinton talked about. It's not just one person.
Right.
It's the decision makers, really. That then a lot of the family policies, the family-friendly things, a lot of the issues that we all care about are addressed because they're more understood because of the experience that those people bring.
What
So.
about John Fry, who succeeded? I mean, I've seen him in action a few times, and he sounds like the kind of man who would encourage women leadership. Do you deal with John on a regular basis?
Very much so. In fact, he is very actively supporting our 20th anniversary activities, and he's involved in some of the programs themselves, and he's been a big supporter. In fact, the 2 years that he has been in his presidency, he has come to the Woman One event that I put on every year, which is to raise money for minority women to study medicine. And that is a program I started that is now just enormously successful and popular. And John has, with his extremely busy schedule, has made it a point to be there when we honor an outstanding woman and have these fabulous young women scholars.
What is the biggest success story you can think of from your Woman One or Vision 2020, or what gives you the most pleasure?
Well, the Woman One program is an enormously rewarding experience for me, because the women that have come through that program, first of all, we've never had one dropout. We've had 24 scholars so far since I started this. And we award those women $80,000 over 4 years for their medical school tuition support, which makes their debt less, and it enables them to pursue primary care if that's what they want to do, because they have less debt, less to pay back. They don't have to go into a specialty. But also, they're all committed to serving underserved communities. So they go out after they graduate and they work in in areas where people need physicians. So that's hugely rewarding in general. But there's one woman that graduated this year who I am particularly proud of. Her name is Sharon Manuel. We call her Ronnie. And she not only got her MD degree, but she also got a PhD.
At the same time?
At the same time.
Oh, my goodness.
She had
there aren't enough hours in the day.
Well, she had more than 4 years. I mean, because you have to, in the PhD program, you have to get your that degree separately. So she was actually in the school for, I guess, 8 years. But she won all kinds of awards in terms of her research projects. And at the same time, she had a young daughter when she started medical school and a very supportive husband, and she had another baby during the time she was in school. So when she graduated, she had with her her husband, her 2 little girls, her mother, who had helped her all the way through, and she has gone off to the University of Kentucky on a residency now that is just wonderful. Many of our students go on to very, very high-powered residencies because they're stars.
You must have a very supportive husband also, because if he could put up with a statewide senatorial campaign, forget about your other obligations.
Yeah, well, he understands the passion I have for the cause, and
Well, he must be equally passionate to share you with the world.
Well, he has his own life. He's actually finishing his PhD right now at Penn. He is. He's writing his thesis right now. So he did that after he retired. So I give him a lot of credit.
What did he retire from?
He was in the financial services business, and then he had gone to Wharton, and he decided he wanted to study history. So he got his master's in history, and now he's getting his doctorate. So now that I've said this on television, he'll have to make sure he finishes.
He'll have to make
yeah, he will, though. No question.
Well, our guest today has been the fabulous Lynn Yeakel, who is the director of the Institute for Women's Health and Leadership at Drexel University College of Medicine, and executive director and co-chair of Vision 2020. And you're going to hear more about their 20th anniversary celebration in the near future. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you.